All right, well, hello everyone. We've got a small crowd here at Grimsby Tackle tonight, and hello to those that are watching from the comfort of home, or maybe you'll be watching this as it's recorded on YouTube and uploaded later on. So we've got Shane Thombs here from FINtastic Fishing, myself, Mark, here from the shop, and yeah, we just thought we'd take some time and recap our seasons on the water, both Lake Ontario salmon and trout and Lake Erie walleye. And as we go through the evening, we'll take some questions too. So if you're watching at home from Zoom, there's the chat function on there. And Roman, we got to thank Roman. He's got us set up very nicely here with a nice little production setup with multiple cameras, and he'll be moderating behind the scenes. So thank you, Roman. So yeah, just if you have any questions, just type them into the chat function, and Roman will direct them to us as we go on. And yeah, you'll be kept on mute as well, so on the Zoom function. Couple announcements. Tomorrow morning, for anyone interested, the Golden Horseshoe Outdoors Club is having their annual shore perch derby at 50 Point Conservation Area. Usually the marina gets a nice run of perch in there, and it's only $5 a ticket. It starts at 7:30, but I believe the gates open at 50 Point at 6:30, runs till 12:30, and there'll be a snack bar open. There's prizes 1st till 5th. I think they've got some extra prizes too. If kids are going out, they'll end up with a little something too. And there'll be a 50-50 as well. So yeah, fun event there. Should be a decent weather day tomorrow, and of course there's always a chance at hooking into a trout or a salmon or a pike in the harbor there too. So
yeah, it's a great event. Being on the shore as well, you end up doing a lot more talking than fishing.
Yeah, a bunch of good
Very
guys
social.
there. Harvey and Dave and those guys always put on a good event.
Absolutely.
No other real announcements that I can think of within the fishing community right now. Things are still kind of on pause for the most part. Straight line anglers had a meeting this past Tuesday, and there might be another one in December, but watch the regular news channels, social media and emails for any updates on that, and you'll see more updates as more fishing clubs navigate these next few months, and hopefully we can back to regular schedule events.
Even Stelco Angling Club, they're doing their meets. So a lot of groups are getting back together. DeFasco Angling Club as well. Yeah, St. Catharines Game and Fish had a board meeting last week as well, so they're wrapping up this year's activities and getting planning ahead of time for next year as well. So I think we'll just roll into our recap of the spring on Lake Ontario. It wasn't a bad spring. We had some stop and go times with ramps and marinas being open and closed at different times, but thankfully at least the St. Catharines Game and Fish, they kept their ramp open throughout it. There was a pause for a few weeks for the spring derby. It started for a couple weeks in April, then they had to pause, but then it resumed again. And then, yeah, it wasn't until June until other events like the Silver Salmon, GOSD, and everything else got underway. But thankfully, those two big derbies went on, and we'll kind of recap some of those things as we get into the summer portion. Spring, I know, well, I think my first trip and your first trip, we went out on the first day of the Salmon Derby on that Saturday. We took Jeff out and kind of scanned the waters a bit. We ended up fishing a little bit by the Dalhousie, but it wasn't until we got a little past Port Weller we found some good colored water and a slightly warmer temps in there. We got into some browns, and it was mostly a stick bite that day. I think we were running some of the live targets and the bay rats, and I know we got one fish on I think it was this spoon here. It was a mixed veggies super slim Dreamweaver. Got that on a one color off the boat. So straight off the chute.
Yeah, I think we got into a couple lake trout in front of the canal on our way back too. So
The following weeks there was, so the brown trout in Weller Bay, that area between Weller all the way to the I would say 4 Mile Point, that stretch seemed to have had a decent water first thing in the spring. It warmed up really quick. In fact, I think it was the third week of April, and the water temps inside the bay was 51 degrees, which is quite warm. In typical scenario, all the waters around it was like 43, 42. So it was nice to find that warm pocket. And I got a weird story. So that second week of April, I hook what was a big fish, right? And bringing this fish in, my client were bringing this fish in, ended up being a Chinook. It was about 20 pounds.
Oh, right, yeah.
But it was dark, like it was like a fall run Chinook. Completely black color. If you've been on my Facebook page, you would have seen it. It was definitely a mature fish, drop back. And it wasn't the first and only fish that we saw. In my boat, yes, it was the only mature fish caught in the spring. But there was also another one caught on the Niagara Bar by a friend. And I heard one that was also taken in New York.
And one was caught
and
in
one off Dalhousie as well.
In the
so
harbor.
I don't know what phenomenon was happening there, but you know, some of those salmon, they actually dropped back. Whether they survived the whole season, I don't know. But the one that we caught, it was pretty spent, to be honest. It was empty for sure, but it had enough oomph to bite the stick bait that we were running.
Yeah,
so.
we'll see if we can edit in a picture when we upload this to YouTube, so maybe we'll see
it was
that.
an interesting little find.
Yeah.
We also got Atlantic salmon as well, but not natural Atlantic salmon. The one that we got was a tagged fish, and from what I understand, they released the mature fish in Port Dalhousie.
They did last December, yeah.
And then they go out into the lake, and Ministry of Natural Resources shares an interesting map that shows where tagged Atlantic salmon have been released for stocking efforts, typically those mature fish, and then where they've been caught, and a lot of them are around Dalhousie actually.
Yeah. So then we had that early April there was some browns in salmon being caught in the skinny water, less than 30 feet of water. From what I recall, there was just a short window where the water from Dalhousie going west to Grimsby had decent color, but what happened, it got really clear. We also had low water this year, and I think that's I think that ties into the picture that we'll talk about as we go here. So the water was fairly clear for that main south shore on that end, but it wasn't until you got east of the Welland Canal where there was a bigger band of green water, and that water just kind of stayed there for the most part throughout April into May then.
Into May, yeah. And interestingly enough, too, I mean, we're all very familiar that the smelt population has taken a nosedive in the past, 20 years. But we actually had a smelt run this past spring, and that smelt run in the Niagara River, I think it helped our fishing. Especially because I think the alewife population was still around that early part of the spring. They're still way out in the over deep water in the lake and not coming in yet to spawn, but we had the smelt there to draw in those salmon. So we had those salmon, Chinooks and cohos mixed in right inside the actual trough of the Niagara River as it's coming out into the lake. So not only just off the edge and towards Weller, but inside the trough itself was chock full of salmon for, I would say, 2 weeks.
Yeah. And
it was excellent fishing.
Yeah. So the bait of choice then was the stick baits emulating those smelt. The Yoweye Mooneye was a very popular bait this year. You've got one there, more of a walleye color, but just to show you the bait. And your reef runners. And your bomber long A's, those in the live target smelts, of course, they were the top choices, when fishing in that 40, 30, maybe slightly shallower water area there. Just anywhere from 2 colors to get them, 10, 15 feet down, up to 5 colors to get them about 25 feet down is a good way to fish those shallow diving stick baits. You know, you can stretch them out to, you know, 50 feet or so behind a rigger. And spoons, you know, mixing those with the lighter spoons again, like the Super Slims. And then the mag spoons got pretty good too. This is one of my favorites that I run all throughout the year. This is the Glow two-face from Dreamweaver. They also have a standard silver one as well.
Yeah, I think we got a question.
No question?
Oh, no
Okay.
question? All right, okay.
The Dave Salmon Slapper. Anything with the black, green, and glow patterns are a favorite of mine, you know, in the early mornings. And then when the sun comes up, this is the regular version, but showing you the silver version of the, this isn't the two-face. Oh yeah, it is the two-face. It's got the black dots on the back side of it.
Blacks.
Yeah. Pertel is a color I've been playing with. This is a custom,
good
a
one.
Fish USA custom one as well. So
This is a great spoon too as well. A hot fish, really thin spoon, excellent at slow speeds. We tend to use them a lot for when we're trolling slower with, let's say, cut bait. You can get away with speeds of around 2 to 2.2, 2.4 miles per hour on this spoon. It works really well. I find that I end up running these on cores. Just remember though, when you're slowly, you know, trolling with cut bait, that your cores are going to get deeper as well. So just consider that as well. If you're trying to target 20 feet of water or 25 feet of water, and you're thinking, okay, I got to go to my 5-color lead cores, well, you might actually be fishing deeper than that because you're going slower. So maybe a 4-color or a 3-color lead core would be more beneficial to get that spoon in that depth zone.
mm-hmm. Okay,
Yep, a
sure.
little bit closer. There we go.
So this one here is more of a daytime color. This is the Blue Dolphin UV from Michigan Stinger, but you know it works good in the other brands too. Oh, yeah.
Gonna
There
get
we
nice
go.
close.
Closer for that. So that's a nice color when the sun is up midday. This the Blue Dolphin or the Green Dolphin as well.
I'll show this to the guys over here too. And Michigan Stinger.
Yeah. Yeah, and then then as we got into to mid-May, as the water was warming up, then the bite right off the drop-off there by the bar, as it typically does that time of year, it got pretty good. And some guys were still running the stick baits, but more you're into your mag spoons and mixing in some flasher flies. And for those that like cut bait, they were running that as well as fishing deeper, depending where the fish are in relation to the drop. But you know, you can be fishing anywhere from 50, 60 feet down, anywhere to 170, 180 along that drop. It all depends. We'll get into more of the cut bait and the flasher flies in a bit. One phenomenon, another thing that we saw this year from mid-May through early July was an abundance of coho. And
Big coho too.
yeah, some numbers and above average size. It was quite good. I don't have any up here, but the little 6-inch red Dodgers or Spin Doctors or orange ones with peanut flies, with green copper or a green crinkle, a hammer pattern, anything like that was really good behind those little flashers. Anything on a 2-color, if the coho, were 15 feet down or so. And then as the water warmed up, we were running, 5-color combos with that. This was a couple good spoons. This is the UV mixed veggies.
Show the back on that one too, Mark.
Yeah, the key to this, it has an orange back.
See that as well. So always look at the back of the spoons too. They're just as important.
That was
Often
good.
you'll get gold finishes and copper finishes. Some of the walleye spoons, for an example, a lot of copper finishes. But those particular DW spoons are really good with that orange back. Like them.
And there's orange Slurpee, another of the Fish USA customs that has an orange back on it.
Just that bright color up high, it seems to get the coho's attention.
Yeah, and even
brings
coho
them in.
killer right there. So yeah, it was great. We were catching those coho refresh me. I think it was around 100 feet of water on the early part, out to 150 or so in there. But there was a lot of them, and in the summer we saw some big ones, and we're pretty sure they were hybrids, but nonetheless they still had coho tendencies to them based on their markings. So
I think there was just a big bumper crop of big cohos out there this past year.
A few over 20 pounds.
There was 32 that was caught in the central basin area of the lake. Dandy fish for sure. Again, questionable whether it was a hybrid. That's we'll find out a little bit more soon.
Yeah.
I think there was some samples that were taken on that fish.
Then as the water warmed up, we had that traditional, a bit of a lull period in early to mid-June. The water is warming up and the fish are starting to migrate around the lake a little bit more. When that
happened really soon. I would say the second week of May, we already started to see the fish start to peter off. And they never really hung around, and I think a lot of it has to do with we never had a good stretch of east winds to keep the fish onto our side. They seem to have dispersed really quickly. We had lots and lots of west and southwest winds throughout the entire month of April and May, and we lost our fish very quickly. So that time of the year, so often a lot of guys will say, well, we need to stock more fish, in our own local port. But that doesn't necessarily equate to more fish to be caught in your area. It's more conditions based. Are the fish sticking around because the water is properly set up in that location? So the warmer water, colored water, and if the wind's pushing that stuff away, and often that's the case in the spring, you end up losing your good fishing window faster, which is sometimes unfortunate, especially this past spring. This past spring, charter guys were not able to operate. So we were still not able to operate till the latter part of June. And so the entire spring, you may have seen charter boat guys out there, but there's often only one or two of us out there fishing 4-rod spread, no different than anybody else. So, it's... I thought about this on the way down, is that how does that influence the start of the season for a lot of the the talk about what's a hot lure and but without the charter industry, I find that that sort of hum was very quiet.
Sure.
And it's unfortunate, but it's the case because simply there's just not as many lines in the water and not able to pinpoint what it is that is the big bite for that particular season to get it started.
Yeah, it was kind of
back to normal this coming year.
Yeah, it was anticlimactic a little bit. No charters going on, no tournaments.
Exactly.
The Derby was down for a few weeks, so guys were out fishing and fishing was good, but just didn't seem to have the same buzz.
Right. That's what I was meant. Yeah, exactly.
But then late June and the long weekend came and for Canada Day there. And it was fantastic fishing there for almost 2 weeks. The long weekend was spectacular, and the weather was great too. We caught good fish between Jordan and Grimsby in 70 to 100 feet of water, and flasher flies. It was a strong bite for those then. We did use some meat midday once that early aggressive first light bite died down. This was one of my hot ones for early in the mornings this year. That was the sheep fly from Atomic, and it's a two-face glow paddle there. That's a Pro Troll, but it didn't really matter, what rotator we used. We used the Spin Doctor and the Pro Troll ones, and they were both pretty consistent. That was a good morning color there with a lot of glow. Then when the sun came up, then we were into your chrome finishes, still with some glow tape in the dots. That's the Captain Valium, and I believe that's a hypnotist fly. So,
and that's so much the case. We do make a lot of adjustment like that, but it's almost it's that de facto start to using that glow pattern first thing. and then go into more of a chrome pattern as the sun goes up.
Yeah.
But you can delay that. You can continue to run that. You can continue to run that if it's a heavily overcast day, and see what it does. When the bite starts to slow on it, make sure you have this as your 1-2 punch. Your second punch is coming out.
Yeah. A combo that Shane and I have coined 7 o'clock over the years. It's basically just, you know, a flasher, an 8-inch flasher, regardless of the brand, that's got black, green, and glow to it, with a black and green glow fly. Typically the Bulldog fly, you know, the NBK and the 42nd fly has worked well too. Those have been good. We call it the 7 o'clock fly because when we're morning fishing, generally by 7 in the morning, if it's a sunny day, we pull it out and then we substitute it for something else. And then if we're evening fishing, you know, once 7 p.m. comes, then we'll put it on and it'll fish right well until dark. So
one of the great patterns I had was a smaller size fish type paddle. It was on a chrome blade, but two-face. Yeah. And it was amazing. It was probably one of my best ones during that time frame of early July. Not a big paddle, just that smaller size, 10-inch. It worked really well.
Yeah, yeah. You know, the hammer fly and, you know, your Dalmatian patterns, there are other combos. You know, this is a big paddle, but I'm more meaning an 8-inch version. You know, that's a combo that, you know, can be run all day long for the most part, just with the colors that are in it. Seems to work well. And then the cut bait, you know, the flies will catch fish all day long, but often when that early frenzy is over, then we're into using the herring strips. You know, sometimes I have this down though first thing on the one rigger. This is a Glow Pro Troll fishing chip, and that's with the just the white Glow atomic meat rig. Oh, down. Oh, I was missing the camera there.
Another good one I liked is the it's same thing, two-face, but it has a crushed glow, but UV on that side. So that's one of those kind of blades that, you know, you could run first thing in the morning, glow up that side, and then you can keep it out there, you know, because of the UV. It has still that sheen. You know, we were talking in the back room about you know, UV coming on fairly strong in a lot of our you know, picks for you know, flashers as well as spoons. It really has come on quite a bit, very popular. But you still need the sun in order to get the UV to go. So first thing in the morning, it's glow or it doesn't go, right?
That's true.
But then after, you know, the UV can really start kicking in. And UV is just an example of the sun's rays as it gets further into a different band. Right, so our visible light is a separate band, or the UV side of that is something that we don't normally see in our view range. So it's just expansion of what the sun can provide us.
Yeah, and you know, we typically run the big flashers with the downriggers, and then if we're wanting to get the meat going on divers, and we're usually 8 or 10-inch flashers. This is the 10-inch. Is this the two-face? Oh, there we go. So that's a nice size to use on the divers or on your coppers. So or the smaller paddles as we were showing there.
Yeah, I like the 10-inch. They're a good size. If you're going to run flies on them, make sure that the flies are a little bit longer in length, usually a 30-inch fly, rather than doing the shorter 22 or 24 that you would do on an 8-inch. Just a little bit longer on the bigger size flasher. It tends to get better bites.
Yep. And for those that maybe are newer to running cut bait or herring strips, you know, a good way to start is to use the deep rig tackle. You know, there was MC Rockets for many years. They're still around. They're just not in production as much anymore. But Deep Rig Tackle is out of Burlington, and he's got some good colors
So they have the aluminum spine in them, so you can tweak them to roll. You want them rolling at the right speed. So no, they're a good alternative if you're not into using the reel strips as well. And most of them glow in the dark too, which makes them good.
On that as well, I mean the artificials. What we found with running, this style of artificial cut bait is this year especially. I don't know, you probably heard it here in the store as well. The spoon and the flasher fly bait was really good this year. So guys were upping their speed, right? And they weren't trolling as slow as they would normally do when the bite is a little bit off, or you got to run the cut bait. So they're still able to run this at that speed. They just don't have the bend on that bait as much.
Yeah.
It's more straighter, not perfectly straight. It's not like a banana, but it's it's got a light bend, so that it still has that nice roll, even though you're doing 2.4 to 2.6 miles per hour.
Yeah.
You can still get those artificials to roll at the proper speed and proper action.
Yeah.
They're not spinning out of control.
Yeah. So then what happened moving along, big fish in the end of June, that first week in July, and then we had a whole bunch of warm water roll in on our side of the lake. And what that did was it pushed the fish out deeper because they couldn't tolerate the water. Like it was, I can't recall exactly what it was, but it was quite warm, and we had to fish deep. And you didn't know that unless you had a fish hawk or any type of down probe to tell you where that thermocline was. So I can recall I was out with a couple of customers that following weekend, and we were over 200 feet of water off Dalhousie, and we were only catching our fish. We caught a couple on a deep rigger, and then on a wire diver with a mag diver. I think it was out like 250, and a 400 copper.
Yeah, 300, 400 copper.
Yeah.
350 copper. Yeah, you had to get down there, and that was again just running those types of blades all through the day. That glow pattern all through the day. I actually, on that particular day, you were fishing beside me, but I was doing the 10-inch spinny. It was the green glow dot 10-inch spinny with a glow fly, like your sheep fly.
Yeah.
And it did really well for me off the rigger.
So then we kind of had that, and then even the North Shore, it was not as happening as it normally would be at that time of year too. So a lot of guys were running around looking for fish. There was some quality fish being caught. It was the end of June when that large, I think 42-pounder was caught off Newcastle, and there was a couple other fish that were in the high 30s off that way, but they weren't getting numbers by any stretch. So it was a little tough, and it continued right to the end of the month. We had the King of Kings shootout out of Scarborough on the August long weekend, and there was a few fish to be caught off the drop, and heading east around Pickering down towards Whitby and that, but it was tough, and we ended up going offshore out to 300 feet of water to get our box of fish. So yeah, that's just how it was. Can't emphasize enough the importance of having some sort of a down speed and temp unit, if it's one of the fish hawks, or if it's the older depth rater or sub-troll units. If you're going to be fishing regularly on the lake, it can certainly make a big difference between catching some fish or a lot more fish on any given day, to know where that thermocline is, but most importantly, what your speed is.
I think we got a question.
Yeah, we do.
All right.
Jer's asking what happens to the fish with the constantly changing wind direction over the course of a week?
No, good question.
Yeah, wish we knew.
Yeah. Yeah, let's radio track them. It's a real interesting question. Every time that we've had these major wind events, or things have flipped, you had a east wind and then finally a southwest wind, and it's just, where's the fish at next? And it's going to be a lot of searching, right? But one of the things that I've come to use in my boat a lot now is scanning. If you have your transducer mounted properly, you can scan at speed. And what I mean by speed is not full throttle, but you don't have to go full throttle. Just get up on plane, 19, 20, 22 miles an hour, and have a nice clear screen so you can mark where bait is.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you start marking these little pods, and trust me, they're not big pods like you would see as you're trolling, but there'll be, you know, a little cluster here as on the screen as it goes through the history. When you start seeing a frequency of that happening more and more as you're driving, spin around, slow it down, set down, and scan it properly. I find that has been really advantageous for not only, you know, the salmon fishing out in the lake here, but also for walleye fishing. This particular year, for an example, our offshore bite was horrible for walleye, and we'll talk a bit about walleye in a bit. But you know, in order to find or narrow down the best water that we can, it required scanning. So using your sonar to its fullest is probably the best scenario, and a lot of it has to do with mounting it properly on the at the back of your boat so that it's always in clear, clean water. Before you mount it, look down the hull and make sure that there's nothing, no chine, no ports for water to come in for live wells or whatever in the way. You want nice, clean water. And it may take a little bit to adjust that transducer to get it into that clean water. Mine's a through haul, so it's always clean. But that also means that I got to bump up the gain a little bit. But it works great.
Mm-hmm. Maybe
no.
Yeah.
He's making it more technical now.
Oh,
all right.
It's too easy. He wants to know if the barometric pressure has any effect on the salmon.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I think it does. You know, you see a lot of times, especially on an approaching cold front coming, or conditions. I remember one year we were out off of Grimsby here.
I know.
And they were calling for tornado watch to the west of us, but we were out in the lake still. It was still, we're watching on the radar, and but these big storms were coming, and that lake was on fire. Everyone around all the way to Toronto was smashing fish, and we were doing awesome out here too. I don't know how many fish we got on that day, but some big fish too as well.
Yeah.
But that sense of the barometer about to change drastically really put those fish on the feed. Conversely, after a thunderstorm, we've seen it many, many, many times that the bite is it's a dud. And you really got to work for your fish. Overnight, you know, when it's thundering and you got a trip the next morning, you're like, what am I going to do? Yeah, but it can be a struggle for sure. That barometer does have some effect to it. A steady barometer is the best, obviously, whether it's high or low. I find, though, this past July, we had lots of rainy conditions, lots of low-pressure systems. And I really do think that hurt our fishing the latter part of July because it just was sour weather constantly. And although it may have seemed like it was consistent, I think they still do like a high-pressure system every once in a while, just to change things up, or whether it gives them an advantage of some sort as they're mixing it up with prey. So, you know, the barometer does have an effect. Has it worked for us to predict when the bite's going to be best? I don't know about that. We could throw our best guess at it, but you know, we do our best every time we go out. That's all we can do, right?
Sure. But maybe we talk about moon moon phases too, while we're kind of on that same scientific subject.
I particularly like following the moon. It's, you know, every little bit of information that you can gather and try to build your own confidence. Everyone knows that while you're out there, if you have the confidence to catch fish, you'll likely turn it into catching a few fish. And for me, that's what the moon phase does for me, and the moon major and minor times. You have this anticipation of the window to come up, you know, the big bite to come up. And that's what really gets your adrenaline going, and it makes you want to think about how you're going to get your fish the next window that's coming. You know, you rub your hands when you look at the next day and you're saying, Okay, where's the major and minor? Oh, the major lines up at daybreak. Oh, that's a big deal, right? And you get out there and you're like fired up because you're hoping to get the lots of bites.
Sure.
But full moons, like
Define major and minor.
major and minor. So the gravitational pull of both the moon, sun, and the Earth as it's orbiting in alignment from your geography on the Earth will determine, very similar to tides in the ocean. You have a high tide and a low tide. Well, very similar is these major and minor windows of major bites. So you can get apps for this. You can download free apps that will tell you, the major and minor bites and when it's best. I can show it to you after the seminar if you wish. And you can really kind of plan your day. And what I mean by that, so when we get a chance to go out fishing, which is for me a weekend, I'm going fishing regardless. I don't care if it's a full moon or not, I'm going fishing. But it gives you an added advantage of strategy. So you know that you're within a bite window. I'm not likely going to move to find and locate new fish. I'm going to stick where I am, where I found fish, right? So your strategy is not necessarily to, to move around and find fish during a bite window. You go with what you know, and you stick to it during that bite window. When it softens, yeah, that's a good time to go and do some more searching and finding that needle in a haystack, maybe when the bite's a little slower. But don't move off of your program during a major bite. And that also means less experimentation for me. I'm not going to be, trying different things during a major bite window when that may not be the best time to do those types of experimentation.
Yeah. We'll add some links for the different websites and the apps at the conclusion of this as well, as well as links for Lake Ontario satellite imagery and the temperature as well. It's good information. Then we got into no more questions, Roman. That was good, Jay.
Awesome. Thanks for the question there.
Yeah.
That was good.
Then we kind of rolled into stager fishing, and that's what we call when the mature salmon are getting closer to their ports of origin, where they were stocked or hatched from. They're hanging out front. Usually, we kind of consider the water to be in and around 100 feet of water or less, but sometimes it can be a little bit deeper. And we saw that it was on the deeper side of things, at least on the south shore again this year, because that water still stayed fairly warm for the most part. Talking more, Niagara, Port Dalhousie way. I can't remember on the top of my head what Bronte and Credit were for the temp, but we did see some encouraging numbers of fish being caught out front. We kind of had
a little bit better this year than it was last year.
Yeah, the last few years had been a little soft. I know 2011 to 17, maybe 18, 17 for sure was excellent stager fishing for the most part for those years. And the last couple of years have just been a little softer for probably various reasons.
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. It was a dry falls. Yeah, dry fall.
But that 80 to 100 foot water from Dalhousie, Weller to the Niagara Bar was decent fishing. At the end of August, early September there, we had a couple events there that we fished, and we got some fish on it was the King of the Lake tournament. We ended up going to Bronte, which a few other teams did too, and it was busy there. There was a lot of boats, but that's because there was also a lot of fish hanging out there and at Credit too. So, the flasher fly program and your flasher and cut bait was pretty good. Mixing in some plugs like Lyman's or the Dreamweaver Captain's Choice plugs were also good for us for taking our fish. And then that's kind of when I stopped fishing. I hadn't been out after Labor Day this year. Some years I do get out a little bit more. I know you plugged it out there for a few more.
A few others. What I found though is that the month of September and early part of October we've had a lot of west and southwest winds again. We never really had that water come back to us, warming it up. So our thermocline got very thin. And what I mean by that is the water column, the more warmer water you have in the fall, typically we get, the bait fish in this area and the salmon are still around for a longer length of time. And what I mean by salmon is not the mature fish, but the immature fish, the 1 and 2 year olds. They're all silver. Often we'll fish offshore for them. So you're going out into the blue zone, the 250 plus, out to 350 or 400. Typically, that's where that warmer water is really important to keep the bait in our end of the lake. But unfortunately, that time frame, we had lots of winds that pushed that warm water away, and there was really only dribs and drabs of bait in close, like that 60 to 70 foot water, where the water was not disturbed as much by those offshore winds, and closer to the river, the plume of the river, because Niagara River is still flowing warm that time of the year. So it's still attracting bait, but it was a tough bite, and not many fish around on our end of the lake to make it worthwhile, like it is sometimes in the early fall.
Yeah.
Yeah, another question?
Another question here. What water temp do you look for in the spring to start the year?
The warmest water you can find. So yeah, normally, you're just looking for something that's, an extra couple degrees that's warmer than the rest of the lake. And normally you're finding that water anywhere where there's a creek or a harbor mouth. A rock break wall will generate and put off heat into the water too. So,
yeah. I remember back in the early 90s, I think it was, and I'm not sure, maybe you can help me with this, is some of the newer electronics. It used to give you a histogram or a history, like a line graph that would show you the temperatures reads over time. And that was really helpful because as you're trolling, if you didn't pay attention and you were trolling and then all of a sudden you gotten a few bites, but you were paying attention to the rods and catching the fish and whatnot, and then the bite slows. I remember back in those days we used to have that line graph, and it would show you that little history. Oop, oh, there was a warm spell there. Oh, okay. So there was something that happened there.
Just curious, you know how you can actually, if you when you have active screens, you have your sonar, your GPS. You can actually make your sonar your active screen. You can actually scroll back at the screen. Now, I don't know if that would work, but that's something I'm definitely going to try to see if that works.
You might be able to do it that way. Just kind of pan over your screen, because there is a bit of a memory of what you've displayed over the past. How long is the memory?
I'm going to find that out.
Yeah, but if you nailed a few fish, right? That's only like, okay, well, something happened there, and it didn't look any different. My depths haven't changed. I didn't mark anything, or something has not really explained it. Maybe that's the clue. Look at the history. Yeah.
So following up on that, Jordan still wants to know specifically what temp would be a good temp.
Sure, I was going to follow. Yeah, thank you. I was going to follow up on that. Generally, it's around, once we see pockets of like 44, 45 degrees, that's often when we see a nice number of kings being caught.
Yeah, it starts to set up then. I would say almost more times than not, 42 degrees is about the kind of the time where you start to hear a few reports of fish coming in. And it's not on fire, but typically, once that temperature gets up to around 45, and then more than that, all the way to 50 degrees. Once it gets to the 50 degree mark, then it's usually the game is on, right?
Sure.
But it's not only just about water temperature, right? So we're also talking about water color. Yeah. The fish have to feel comfortable in that water in order to stick around, especially in the shallows. So green water is often what we look for. So the warm water and green water combination together is the ticket. And generally that's with outflows, right? Coming out of creeks after a good rain. Now this past spring we didn't have much rain. It was a very dry spring. So creeks like 40 Mile Creek and 12 Mile Creek in Jordan in the 15 and 16 mile creeks off of Charles Daly. Those creeks didn't flow that much, didn't have that big plume of warm brown water to warm up the waters close to that and change over to green. I know we're getting into spring again, but going back to that question, what temperature do we want? Well, it's the warmest water that we can find is what we want, because it's typically still not warm enough, right?
Yeah, and I think too, you know, with the low water this year, as we touched on, there just wasn't, so it wasn't splashing up on the rocks, and you just weren't getting all that sediment washing around the lake, kind of creating that plume as well.
Right.
So that's a theory I heard being talked about. Yes?
On the notes of the green water, this is my own question. What about like the milky, muddy waters? Like when you see that,
Yeah.
how often you see the wind pushing that in the direction, right?
Yeah, like in the mud itself. We've caught fish in the mud itself. It's not easy. I do believe the fish need to see something in order to get it. But, you know, at the same time, I found even on, you know, when the boat traffic is really bad in the green water, then the fish will push into the brown water because they feel more, you know, more safe, I guess, and more secluded in there. So you can get in there. But you might need to change your tactics, right? You might need to get, you know, stick baits with rattles or bright colors. One of the go-tos for me when the water gets brown like that is go to a bigger size body bait, stick bait, like a J13. Even though I'm fishing browns, I'll run a J13 because it's brown water. They need to see it and feel the vibration. But yeah, definitely rattles in the body baits are important at that time of the year. And size of the spoon. Upsize the spoon. Yeah, you're catching browns, and they typically like a smaller size spoon.
They'll hit
Get
a
it
mag
bigger.
spoon.
Get
for
it bigger.
Sure.
Yeah, just to get it thumping.
Yep.
Yeah.
Another question coming from Jer. What conditions would you want to troll slower or faster for Chinooks? So what certain conditions would determine the speed that you troll?
I think first it depends what you're running.
Yeah.
So like for springtime, you know, shallower water with the stick baits, you know, and everyone has different ways of doing it. There's no right or wrong answer, but I think on a general term, 1.9 to 2.2 is often, you know, what we'll run stick baits for the kings, and you can run your lighter spoons at those speeds too. And you know, we're typically those speeds too often if the spread is concentrated using a lot of cut bait. And when we're searching for fish, especially kind of late spring through the summer, we'll bump it up to, you know, easily 2.5 to 3 miles an hour, loaded up mostly with flasher flies and spoons, because those are pretty speed tolerant, you know, when we're covering water looking for fish. And then, you know, and if we're catching fish at that speed, that's great, but maybe if we're trying to target larger fish, maybe then we'll slow down when we're on top of those fish and then set up with cut bait and flies. And there's ways too that you know, a little more advanced stuff that we could get into another time, but there's ways to tweak things to make things run at faster and or slower speeds. You can change the lengths of your leaders, you know, you can tweak the rockets to be conditioned at different speeds. There's different ways. It kind of just depends what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
I did figure something
Did you figure something out?
So on a full screen on a 9, now I don't know if this makes a difference, but if you were to switch to a full screen, you can go about 1,000 feet back
Oh, okay. Yeah.
on your sonar. So the only thing is that this is in simulation mode, so it's not on real time. Right. But the temperature is changing as the graph goes along in simulation, which would probably be, you know, that's obviously happening too. So something to try next summer. If you know, if you think about it out there, say, oh, you know what, I'm going to go to a full screen sonar, and I'm just going to put my active screen, the sonar screen, and you can arrow key all the way over to this end, which is everything that's gone by. And then you can watch your temperature as you're going through that and see if the temperature is changing. You'll see the footage of how far away from your boat you're getting. So that'd be something really interesting to try next year.
Awesome.
One more thing, just as we kind of wrap up the Lake Ontario side, we can come back maybe later for, you know, questions too. For the deep water fishing, if it's something that you want to work on to try and catch those deeper fish, and if you don't have any, I'd recommend getting some Magnum divers. This is a
a 124 millimeter size, or the number 5 diver from Dreamweaver. That or the Magnum Dipsy diver. With the ring, they're the same thing.
Yep.
And they'll help you get down to those that deeper water, 80 to 100 feet, or maybe a bit more. And the key is to fish these with wire line. So 30-pound test, 7-strand wire line, as opposed to your braid. They'll get you down deeper, and they won't collect fleas in midsummer. If anyone's interested in switching over to wire, we can chat about this after the seminar, or you can give us a call or come into the shop, and we'll answer any questions and make sure that you have the equipment to run it. A standard 30-sized Okuma reel, a 600 Dakota, I think the 20-size Saltus. Those are kind of the minimum size reels that you can use to run 1,000 feet of wire. I know the trend is many guys are switching to a one size bigger reel just so they have better torque, and then adding backing on. But that's a subject for another time. And then getting the right rod to run it. So good technique to get down deeper in the summer.
Just an FYI, I run that pretty much all summer, or the wire dive, exactly that setup he's talking about. And I find that it's a 2-to-1 ratio with that dive, exactly, with the wire. So if you're out 100, you're down 50. And I've been all the way out to 200, and I'm down 100.
Yeah.
So even at 250 feet of line, I'm like 125. So it's like a slow on almost.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's really easy to manage.
for sure.
Another item to maybe consider. We're going to get into it a little bit more in future seminars, and maybe even some separate instructional videos, is the use of slide divers, which allow you to run a longer leader. Typically, with a standard diver, 6, 7, 8 feet is the normal kind of leader length, whether you're going to a spoon and then to a flasher fly or then a meat rig. Many guys will run a longer leader than that with these standard divers, but then, you're hand bombing fish in. You almost need 3 guys, the guy on the rod, the guy in the net, and 1 guy hand bombing that leader in. There are advantages some days to having longer leaders behind your divers. They're cumbersome. Maybe it's not for a recreational thing, but if you're trying to up your game a little bit, there are advantages to it. And the slide divers definitely help you get longer leads out. Really effective in the springtime. If you want to use divers, but if you want to be a little stealthy and get stuff, maybe run your leader 20, 30, maybe a bit longer behind, you can with a slide diver. We'll get into that more specifically down the road, though.
I just want to add one thing really quickly on the diver. So just give you an idea, on the one to your, I guess would be your right, is the 107 size, and the bigger size is the 124. I run both, okay, and wire setups or not, I run both. But the 124 I found really handy is I'm able to run big blades. Cut bait blades, kind of like that, behind it as well. So the bigger size diver, I find for me, has more stability, right? It's pinning that bait down there. Even though you got this big flasher that's got a lot of, resistance. You probably felt it when you pop it off the rigger on a rigger rod, and how much resistance that big flasher has. Just imagine it behind a diver too, while it's trying to achieve depth. Now you have this big flasher. At least the 124 seems to be stable. It holds that bait down there. Meanwhile, if you had maybe a smaller size, the 82 for an example, maybe not the 107, but the 82 size will spin out on you. That diver will simply not be able to cut and continue to dive with a big flasher like that. So stability really does help. Remember too, we're trying to troll at a specific speed, right? But as soon as you turn, that one diver that's on the fast side, it's going faster than your GPS speed or down speed, okay? So the faster it goes, the more opportunity for a diver to spin out because it doesn't have the resistance, right? It's not able to maintain pressure and keep it diving down. So stability is really helpful on a 124.
All right. Well, if there's no other questions, yeah, we have a question.
Yeah.
What What is the highest water temperature that you would fish in before you start switching back to a lower temperature?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it's...
You said 42 to 50 in the springtime, but say in the summer, like,
Right.
what's your max? Like, would you go to like 60?
Yeah, so
and
we
then start
caught...
going down?
Yeah,
or-
sometimes you catch kings in warm water, as much as 60-degree water, or
Especially-
62, 64.
Yeah, especially early mornings. Like those
Yeah,
fish,
that's
you know, before the sun is up, they'll be in that high water because the
come right
bait is in that warm water.
Right.
And then, you know, then once the sun comes up, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, then those fish will go down. They'll be sitting in that, you know, stable water, you know, 45, 55 degrees. But, you know, it's no different. You know, on a hot day, you know, you're in the basement, you know, watching a baseball game, but, you know, you got to go upstairs to, you know, because that's where the food is in the refrigerator. You're going to grab your food, and then you're going to go back downstairs in the where the cooler temperature is, because that's where you want to be. So
basically by say 9, 10 o'clock, if you're still in that warm water, you move out.
yeah, but if you're still catching fish,
Yeah,
you
that's the key.
let the action kind of dictate how
Right.
things are.
Yeah. Yeah, out of temp is a very common term we use. You know, if we catch a king that's out of temp, it's generally above that, you know, above the thermocline, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So the thermocline, let me just maybe preface this. For me, to understand where the thermocline bottom part of it is, I put the probe at 49 degrees. So I know where the thermocline ends.
Yeah.
Okay? So above that, above, let's say, 10 feet, is where the transition happens of the thermocline. So I'm already tracing the very bottom of it. Now below that, you can drop your downrigger and it'll go to 40, you know, 47, 46. And a lot of guys will fish that deeper water that's, you know, maybe 10 or 20 or 30 feet below the thermocline because it's that stable water, right? So the big kings are often down there, you know, 42, as little as 42 degrees. They'll catch the biggest kings. That's that stable water. It's always that temperature. And often when the fish are not on the feed, as Mark had mentioned, they'll go down and sound and stay. Now that doesn't mean they don't bite. We still catch them, and often we'll run baits like cut bait, slow down, get it in their face, and fish those fish in that cold water. But that thermocline, I like to know where it is. So the probe might be at 49 degrees, but I'll run the other rigger below that if I see kings deeper. And conversely, above that, if I'm, let's say, targeting rainbows or a mixed bag out offshore. So that 49 degrees just is a point of reference for me to know where, you know, where the bottom of that thermocline is. And you'll see it sometimes on, especially with there's a lot of current and the water is changing a lot. That 49 degree probe, oh, it's gotten warmer. Oh, it's gotten really warm, 55 degrees. Okay, I got to drop things down. It just gives you that clue that the thermocline has started to go deeper and you need to adjust, right? That's often the case with the Niagara plume. Yeah. Oh, it's such when, you know, that warm water coming out of Lake Erie is coming down into Lake Ontario, that thermocline will change dramatically. You come out of Dalhousie and then turn towards the river, and you watch your probe, and you're seeing it warm up and warm up. You got to go down deeper, deeper, deeper.
On your note, we'll get to you in a second, Randy. Talking like late August, like how I was talking about how we were mostly catching our staging salmon in 80 to 100 feet of water. It's because the inside water was too warm, like it was 60 degrees on the bottom. That's just a little too warm for the stager salmon. Sometimes they'll be in there, but they won't be very active. Usually you want like 50, 55 degrees on that bottom in there, and they'll be a little bit more active there. Yeah, we had Randy, did you have a question?
Yeah, with the mag divers there, what's the limitation they can get down to? And I know our friend over here was talking about getting to 100, 150.
I've scrubbed bottom at 130.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
130 feet down, I've scrubbed bottom on them.
Okay. So
Yeah.
how do you actually know? Like the smaller ones, I use the Jensen divers. If you send some of the chart, right? I have a book that gives me a depth chart, line out, depth down. Is there a similar chart that comes with these mag divers?
Yeah, precision trolling, but I believe it also is on the back. Yeah, it does. It shows it on the back as well.
Okay, so
Of
there's
the
one for that
DWD divers.
So the one
I'll
in
have
the
on the
precision trolling book is effective for those particular brands?
Yeah, but so read the fine print though, because I think a lot of the testing deals with the diameter, line diameter, and I think it's 20-pound test.
30-pound braid.
30-pound braid? Okay, 30-pound braid. Yeah.
I have a page in there for wire
Yeah.
line too.
Yeah.
Mark sold me some wire this year for
Yeah.
the first time. I
Oh,
Right.
And even on that note, it's not very common in Canada, but in New York and in Michigan too, a lot of the tournament guys, they'll even run 20-pound test wire. So it's even thinner than the 30-pound. It's a little more funnier to work with. So like I don't recommend using it if you're new to the wire. It's not overly common in Canada. A few guys do run it, but it will get you down a little bit deeper if you need to for those exceptional times in the summer. So yeah.
You talked about proper trolling speeds at different times. My boat doesn't give an accurate low speed, like 2.2 miles
Sure.
per hour. You're getting all that information off your GPS, are you?
Well,
Off
we
your
use the
so-
fish hawk primarily. So that's the, you have a probe on your downrigger, and at whatever depth it's down, it shoots the signal back to a transducer on the back of your boat, which goes to your display unit, and that tells you what your down speed is. Because just because you're going 2.5 miles per hour on your GPS on the surface, that doesn't mean you're going the same speed 60 feet down over 100 feet of water. It could be higher or lower depending on which way the current is going and how strong that current is.
Yeah.
So.
If there was anything that is a benefit, the probe itself giving you the speed down where the business is, but your GPS speed and the differential between the two tells us how much current there is. So while you change course a little bit, oh, my speed has changed, but my GPS speed, so I got to adjust my down speed. Whether you're going into current or going with the current. And that really does help kind of figure other things out too, like what's your strategy as the day rolls on. For me, generally I always the fish moving with the current. They're not necessarily swimming against the current. They're going to be going with the current. So my strategy may be that as the course of the day I'm going to be going down current. And even on flat calm days, you have a current. And by watching your GPS and determining, are you going into the current in one direction versus the other, it really does help. Yeah.
Back to divers for a moment. Is there a favorite color that you have?
Black. Yeah, black. Green is also a good color. And I do run like that. Kelly green is a great color.
Yeah.
But black is probably for me is my go-to and most consistent.
Yeah.
It takes out the guesswork, right? You can match your divers to the flasher colors and to spoon colors and that's all good. You can certainly do that, and that's really the game for me when I'm walleye fishing. But salmon fishing, I tend to just stick with black. It's the easiest one.
Are they less visible with black, really? Because I've heard that black just creates a silhouette.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's
that
not
your
as
theory?
flashy. It's more stealthy.
Yeah.
More stealthy, yeah.
Black or clear are the two main ones. Especially if we're using a flasher with a fly or a meat rig. Often, especially if I'm out scouting the blue zone offshore for rainbows or cohos, I'll make a point of using like an orange diver just to get some more color in the water to generate some more activity.
Yeah.
But if I'm flasher fly fishing or cut bait fishing, I don't want to really think about the diver too much. I want them focused on that part of it. So it's just one less thing to worry about, one less variable.
I got a question. Yep.
Good. I've got a question from Steve.
Steve.
Do you prefer fishing with the current or against it?
It doesn't matter
Yeah.
as long as our down speed's right. But every day is a little bit different. So you're going to judge what the fish are doing, what they like, if you're going in one direction. Because even though your speed might be right either direction, sometimes your bite only happens in one direction. So just being cognizant of that. When you get a few bites and you say, oh, I was on a north troll and going into the current, and you tried the south troll and it didn't give me bites, that's kind of giving you that indication to replicate You know, it's sometimes just what they want. I used to run on a charter boat at a 50 point, and we didn't have down speed back in the late 80s, early 90s. So we always just went by GPS speed and our paddle speed, as a matter of fact, because the GPS was pretty high tech back then. What we found though was he would always say, "Don't troll into the sun." He always said that. Don't troll directly into the sun. He didn't believe that caught fish. This is the captain of the time. And you know, nowadays I don't necessarily buy into that, but there is something to it that maybe over time, you know, he's developed that idea that going into the sun may not be the best direction. Let's just say.
Martin's got something to add.
I got a question, Shane.
Yeah.
You were saying that you thought that the fish were going with the current. But I'm curious. So, like a river fish will always be facing the current.
Yeah.
So, do you think those fish they're drifting with the current, facing the current?
Yeah. And actually, I think what is happening is the bait is moving, because what happens is what the bait is feeding on is the zooplankton, and that is free form. It doesn't swim. It doesn't fight against current. So as the water is pushing that zooplankton, that microscopic plants in animals, it's going through the water column and moving down whatever direction. Bait follows it, and so does the salmon. So I think it's, you know, a chain reaction of the food chain.
And for those that don't have a, you know, an indicator of the current, you know, a down speed and temp unit, you know, when you're out there fishing, and maybe you're not catching fish yet, but you're marking them, you know, you can adjust your speeds, you know, going and having a compass on the boat, especially, you know, having it, you know, at the helm or, you know, where you're steering, can be really helpful. You know, go 5 minutes at a heading, and then maybe alter your direction, you know, a few degrees one way, and then, you know, tweak your speed up or down. Keep doing that until you catch fish, and then try and replicate that. So that's your way of kind of finding out, you know, what kind of a presentation you want. So when you're watching your downrigger cable, if you have divers out, watching the angle of your line going in the water, you know, are all visual indicators that you can use to get some more bites.
Yeah.
So
sounds good.
I think we'll switch over to Lake Erie. Yeah.
All right. Well, we could do that. Any questions before we change topic? No? Nothing on Zoom. All right, guys. Okay, so Lake Erie, yeah, interestingly. You know, 2 years ago, we thought we were in for, you know, the upcoming years of magnificent walleye fishing, going out and catching our limits each and every time. Last year, 2020, we we were hit with very tough fishing. Okay, we didn't have that massive school of fish to come around Long Point and into the Eastern Basin. We just didn't see the massive numbers that we did the previous 2 years. And we thought, well, it might have been because of the conditions. The water was extremely warm in the Eastern Basin. We felt maybe that prevented those walleyes from coming around.
There was a lot of smelt.
A lot of smelt. There's tons of bait. And maybe that's what kept the fish on the west side in 2020 of Long Point. This year, however, conditions are not the same. So our spring and early part of the summer, we didn't have that extreme warm-up that we had in 2020. In fact, our spring was a normal spring. Our month of May was normal for temperatures. It had that nice gradual increase in temperature in Lake Erie especially. So it didn't really tell us. I mean, we were still rubbing our hands hoping that, you know, those fish are going to show up this, you know, early this year. But it really didn't happen. They didn't show up again. And in fact, I would say there was fewer fish from the west that came around Long Point to the Eastern Basin this year than they did the year before in 2020. So I don't know. I have no idea why. I mean, our hypothesis was it was too warm in the Eastern Basin. This year it was not that. So I don't know what's going on. we still had lots of bait. There's still lots of fish out there, lots of productivity. Though west of Long Point, the guys are killing them. You know, Burwell and Bruce, Port Bruce and Stanley and Glasgow, they're smashing walleyes, doing what we were hoping we could do in the Eastern Basin. Again, this year didn't happen. So how did we manage? That's probably the question of the day, is how did we end up, you know, turning fish into the boat, you know, to bring at least decent days on the water. It wasn't easy. We had to target local fish. We had to target the fish that are resident, although there's some, you know, some question as to whether some of them are transients from the west and they just came in to the shallower waters, let's say, of Lake Erie. Hard to say. But nonetheless, the offshore bite was horrible on Lake Erie off of Port Maitland. Not so much later in the season off Port Colborne. So if maybe I'll do this in a time range because it's probably a little bit easier to understand. After post-spawn walleye on the reefs in the Eastern Basin, remember they're primarily you know, the Grand River, maybe a little bit of the Niagara River, but most of it is shoal fish, especially on the American side, you know, around Dunkirk and Myers Reef and, you know, the Sturgeon Point area. That's really good spawning on their side. We have Waverly and then all the way along into some of the reefs, even to Tecumseh and that sort of thing. So post-spawn, those fish, in the old days, or when I say old days is in the 80s and the early 90s, those fish, as soon as they were done spawning, they'd go offshore. And we'd catch them out offshore, typically high in the water column where they can find warm water, but they were offshore. But now they're staying inshore, and their diet has changed. So offshore fish, they feed on things like smelt, pelagic open water bait. And there's lots of it in Lake Erie still. There's no reason for them to change their diet, but instead they're staying in shallower water and feeding on gobies. So we're seeing these walleyes coming into the boat and they're coughing up gobies like crazy. Yep. Like your live well is just full of these gobies, and some of them are big black gobies. The black ones, by the way, are generally the males. So a male goby is generally very dark and they're, you know, some of them are, you know, 10 inches long. Like that's how big they cough it up, and this big gigantic goby is coming out of there. Yeah. Hard to believe that they, you know, but nonetheless, I guess the amount of energy that they're spending to catch a goby is less than out over open water and chasing a smelt. That's the only rationale I can have for it. I mean, you know, even in a nutrition value, I would prefer to eat a smelt over a goby. I don't know. But they're feeding on gobies nonetheless, and they're feeding on them where they reside. So that's generally around the reefs, generally, you know, a little bit shallower, less than 40 feet of water, I would say. And gobies are very different as a species of fish. They don't have a swim bladder, okay? So they always are adjacent to bottom. They always swim along the bottom. They can't suspend. They don't have that ability. So pelagic open water is not a possibility. They will not be up in the water column. They just simply can't do it. So they'll always be on the bottom or close to the bottom. And that's what we're finding is these walleyes. So we're catching these walleyes, and they're coming up with red bellies. They're coming up with, you know, their lower jaws are all scratched. You know, they're rooting around in the reefs now when that wasn't the case, you know, 20 years ago. It was just simply not the situation. So we've had to adapt. And for us, fishing in the Eastern Basin has made it, I would say, a bit trickier. And what I mean by that is you're trying to get, remember, we're allowed to run 2 rods per person. You get a boatload of guys, and you're running the complement of rods that you can try to do, but you're in shallow water. So how effective can you possibly get all of those lines exactly where the fish are, close to bottom, and not get hung up, right?
'Cause
It's a tough deal.
unlike when we're fishing shallow water for Lake Ontario, we're keeping our baits pretty high up in the water,
they
like
come up to
mid
feet.
to the mid to top third, but we're trying to stay near the bottom with
Right.
these things, and you're coming in and out of points and shoals and reefs where you're going, 20 feet to 10 feet and then back, and
Yeah. So, you could start to see that the situation is not easy fishing. Offshore fishing is easy when it comes to the walleye. So it's challenging at best. We're trying to do things with precision trolling. If we're running crankbaits, we're trying to get them to where they need to be, and we're trying to do that in an effective manner. So, keeping our line monofilament all the same, for an example, 12-pound test line, calibrate our reels to make sure that they always run out with the same length of line each and every rod that we use, so we can get those baits exactly where they need to be. We use lead core line as well, but they're not necessarily the long lengths of lead core that we would normally use, let's say out here in the middle of summer. We're talking 1, 2, 3 color, maybe 4 color lead core. So that short cores, we have to be very cognizant of how we're trolling, because you slow a board down, and yes, we're running these all on planer boards. Remember, we're shallow. So these fish, they'll spook away from the boat really easily. So we got to get our baits out away from the boat a little bit. So running an inline planer board, we'll run it out to the side. And what's really important is that you got good boat control. You start to turn a little bit, one board dies, lead core goes down, hangs up on the bottom. And it's not necessarily just one rod that's gone up on the bottom. If you were down and working to get the hooks out of the net, and you go up and you notice that these boards are all just like this on one side, you're in trouble. Your whole side of the boat has to be brought back in and redone. So 4 boards coming back in, all your lines reset, take the zebra mussels off the hooks, and hope that you get all your harnesses back. So we're running a lot of harnesses as well as the LoAllays. So these were really, really hot this year. Goby patterns seem to have been really, really good for me. And mixing it up with, as well, your worm harnesses. So we did run a lot of the Wacom tackle, harnesses, harness blades especially. Some of these colors, Confusion, like that one.
Blueberry muffin.
Sorry?
A blueberry muffin or Erie 51 is that?
Erie 51. And then, Confusion, that's a good one as well. Sometimes I'll run even on, some of the cores that are maybe a little bit deeper, let's say. Let's say if I'm, running in that 30 foot of water, and I got a 4-color lead core, and it's getting down close to the bottom, I want a lot of resistance. I want to pick up that lead core a little bit more with some resistance. I'll run a big blade like that. And it has a little more lift, more resistance, keeping it up off the bottom a little bit more. That's a triple D, a 3D. Yeah. Crankbaits, like the stick baits, the LoAllays were really good. I tend to run them on the shorter cores, usually 2-color cores, for an example, and because they already dive on their own as well. Not much, mind you, but every foot counts in this situation. So our precision trolling was really important. Mark's got a few other baits here, the deeper type of LoAllays as well.
Those are the hooligans.
Yeah, some of the other cranks that I really like to get some use out of as well. Again, on monofilament, on the inline planer boards, and again, adjusting your lead lengths to get to the target depth. So the precision trolling, they have an app, and you can download the app. You can buy the subscription to it, and a lot of the more popular baits, you can look them up and determine based on line diameter what types of lead lengths to get to a particular depth. 12-pound test tends to be the most common. So for me, I run a lot of 12-pound test monofilament just to keep it all consistent for all my stick baits and body baits. So you got the bandits for an example. Some of the great colors that you see here.
Flickers.
Yeah, flicker shad, that's a good one. And sometimes I'll run that with a snap weight for an example to get it a little bit deeper, right? So this one may not get as deep as, let's say, the bandit would at the same length of line. A very good, the deep dive and husky jerk, the 12s. They also have a 14 size as well, larger size, which the guys at Quinny are going to really like. But those baits there are, and for me, it's a lot to do with the activity level of the walleyes, right? So for me, I really like a bait that has, if the bite is soft and maybe they're not as aggressive, a bait with more of a body roll, okay? Which is very much what the husky jerk is all about. It's got that body roll as it swims, okay? Meanwhile, the bandit is a little more aggressive. Not by much. It's a little more aggressive with more of a tail wag, okay? So that tail wag, I find, is a little bit better for more aggressive fish. And further to that, if you get into the reef runners, they're a little bit more of a tail wag. And if you get into power dives, they're extreme in that sense. So you start to get this whole idea of activity level and what the action of those crankbaits should be in order to get the bites. So if you're getting a soft bite or you're only getting them on the tail hook, maybe downplay the action of that body baits that you're selecting and putting out there.
I've got a question from
Yep.
Brian. And the Rippling redfin action, what kind of action do you get off that?
That's pretty fast, but it's actually a body roll as well.
Yeah.
So it does have a bit of a tail wag, don't get me wrong, but it really does roll. And it's one of probably the best actions on a stick bait that you can find right now.
Classic
for sure.
lure.
Classic lure.
Great for walleye. We use it for browns and salmon too.
Yeah.
Let's talk just real quickly about the rods and the reels for
Yeah.
fishing the crankbaits. So
Yep.
we can dual purpose these rods. They're great for brown trout and even
right.
early salmon fishing on Lake Ontario. What kind of setup do you like to use?
For me, because everything's on the inline planer boards for me when I'm running stick baits or body baits when it comes to the walleye, but also for browns. My favorite rods right now seem to be the white diamonds. The white diamonds have they have it in different lengths: 8, 8.5, 9, and 9.5. And those lengths, I do stagger my lengths a little bit so that the inside board is on the shortest rod. Okay, so the longest rod is the furthest board away from the boat because it can pick up the line and keep it out of the waves all the way down to the board. I should mention also that visibility of the boards are really important too for me. And sometimes I'll run some backing line that is high vis, especially on cores. So I have this bright chartreuse, you've seen it on my boat, bright chartreuse backing line. So I have that great visibility all the way down to the boards. The one thing that I've noticed over the years is that you have to manage your rods properly, especially inline planer boards. You're going to try to swim boards in and around other boards to get them in place and that sort of thing. Sometimes that's tough, and having any visual cues of that line so you can maneuver that board around other boards or whatever it might be, it's just an advantage. It helps you, right? It's just another tool.
Yep.
So a bright color backing is what I've been using for a lot of my short cores, and it's monofilament line. Great thing about monofilament backing line on cores, short cores like that, you attach the board over and over again, that last 10 feet of backing line before the core itself, it chafes that line pretty bad. So after the day, kind of feel that stretch before you wind in the line at the end of the day and see if it's nicked. If it is, you can retie it easily, right? That monofilament, retie it onto the core again, and you're all set. But it's that bright visibility that really helps.
Yep.
to read the boards.
There is, you know,
What pound test is that? Your braid backing?
30.
30.
Yeah, I'm using 30-pound mono, and it's high vis. Yeah.
there's high vis braid too as well.
Yep.
So it just depends. Your rods are specialized for that situation, so that's what you choose to use. But
Yeah. Yeah,
It all
I
depends.
actually use a high vis braid for my longer cores that I use out here. So my 10 color lead cores, I have high vis. It's an orange line. Yeah.
and you can get away with the mono because they're shorter cores. You have more
Yes.
room on your reel
That's
to
right.
compensate for that diameter.
Yeah,
When you're
exactly.
filling your reel with more copper or lead core line, you need the braid so it all fits in
Yeah,
there.
yeah. And it's primarily because of the running, the distance you need as backing for an aggressive salmon,
Yeah.
right, in spring. You want lots of backing in order for them to peel it off and not get spooled.
Well, anything else on the Erie
Just
stuff?
one little thing. I noticed that you have this in stock. One of the thing about crankbaits, really key. Not all even straight out of the package, you want to check them to make sure that they're running true. Okay, so let out about 10 feet of line out behind the boat with the crankbait on, and run it beside the boat like this, out of the turbulence of the motor. Okay, and just watch the action, and then pull it faster. Not aggressively, but pull it faster than you would be trolling, and see if that body bait spins out. Okay, if it spins out like this, then there is a problem that you're going to need to tune that bait. Because, yeah, you might say, okay, well, I'm trolling and it's still tracking perfectly fine. But remember, if you're speeding up, let's say turning the boat, that board's going to speed up. And now your body baits are going to go and spin out and catch other lines, or just come up to the surface. You'll actually see it pop up out of the surface. So this particular tool is a crankbait tuner, and it's really neat where you can judge the back side of the package here. It'll show you if the body bait spins out one direction, which side do you need to adjust the eye of the crankbait, and you can adjust the tension, and it will when you squeeze it, it'll click, and you know that you have that one additional, just that ever so slightly change in where the eye is positioned, and then you can test it again and see if it's corrected the problem. More often than not, we're doing it with, it'll actually wreck the eye over time because you're just constantly tweaking it, and you just all of a sudden you get frustrated with the bait, and you throw it back in the box, and you grab another one and try to make sure that it's tuned. Yep. So that's going to be it's going to be worth the money is getting one of these tuning tools. I mean, probably the only other thing I wanted to mention as well, you know, I was a big advocate of running only snaps for my stick baits and body baits for walleye. But this particular year, maybe because the spring there was so many sheephead, especially along the reefs. You catch, you know, in the spring, like when I say spring, it's in June or early July, you'll catch like 10 sheephead to every one walleye. And man, oh man, they drive you nuts, right? But at the same time, what ends up happening is a lot of times with, let's say, your body baits that have three hooks on them, I'll take the front hook off. If there's 3 hooks, I'll take that hook off. Now you'll notice the Yaleyes already have that front hook taken off. Great advantage. And the reason for it is, sheephead especially, they'll come up and they'll take the tail, and then they turn, and we all see the board just shoot back, right? That's when they run like this to the side. And all of 3 of those baits have just pegged their side of their face. And now you're pulling a 10-pound sheephead sideways all the way back in. Well, I'll tell you what happens is that fish is doing this for the next 20 minutes as you're trying to crank this stupid thing in, and your line gets all spun up, right?
Yeah.
So what I've started to do is go into using all ball bearing torpedo swivels. And I'll size them down, but at least I have something that will help to resist a lot of that line, you know, the spinning up of your line because you're bringing in a sideways sheephead. So I do that now instead of a snap itself. and I find that that helps. If you're only getting walleye, then you can go back to the snap, okay? But unfortunately, that's not the case.
Yeah.
One last thing, night fishing for walleye is when I would use a snap, because sheephead, for some reason, I don't know what it is, we don't seem to get them at night.
No, or early mornings.
Or
yeah, it's not, the sun
usually like
cracks a little, and then you start to get
them.
Yeah.
So it's really odd. I don't know why. They're more of a daytime feeder, kind of like a perch, I guess. Perch, it's hard to get them to bite during the night.
Yeah.
But so you can get away with a snap.
Mm-hmm.
But walleye fishing at night is a lot of fun too, and this is the time of the year to start doing that when the water gets cool.
Yep.
And in June as well on the reefs.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you find you lose a lot of blades on the harnesses with the whacker? So you got like the plastic clips, right?
Yeah, the clevis, quick change clevises. Yeah, it will happen. You'll lose them. It often happens in the net, to be honest. So when you're netting a fish, the fish will thrash and the hooks get caught in and the blades will get caught around the net and it pops them off.
You typically don't do any hacks, like I've heard super glue just
No.
to stop them from coming out. And
No, I don't. I've heard that the Dutch fork
that-
clevises.
Torpedo has one too. There's a few
Yeah.
makes out there that
Few
are.
different ones.
I had a rough go like 2 years
Yeah.
ago when I was on Erie with our trailer. I was losing them all the time. Like every time I pull one up, the blade was gone.
Oh, really?
Yeah. it
Oh,
was
okay.
just- I don't know. I couldn't explain it. And then
Yeah.
it stopped, and I don't know, maybe just a bad run or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, there are different clevises, different size clevises as well. If they're undersized, I find those ones pop off real easy. So I use the black ones. Yeah, these are the black ones that are on here, and I've had no problems with them. So you'll see the clevis in there.
The white ones.
The white ones are the smaller ones, and they pop off.
That one, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I found too.
Huh.
Yeah, black ones I don't seem to have as much. The one thing, I mean, this past 2 years has been less of a spoon bite than previous years, okay? But when those walleyes come back, and those guys that are in the Central Basin, the spoons are they're their go-to. And the reason for it is they don't have to deal with worms. They don't have to deal with extra hooks, getting the hooks out of the fish and out of the net. They're very simple and very effective is running a spoon. And you're running
a little
them fast.
Yep,
Yeah.
a little faster.
So you get rid of a lot of the junk fish. Well, I call them junk fish. Sheephead and silver bass and that sort of thing. They don't seem to, in the Central Basin there's lots of them, but you end up weeding through those and getting the walleye instead. So, so spoons, if those walleyes come back to the Eastern Basin, they're going to be hot again. So be prepared. I think that we'll eventually see those fish again come down our way. I don't know why or how they don't.
Yep.
Yep. You got some pretty neat colors there, the
Yep.
allies. Hooligans. That's
Yep.
good.
Any other questions out there on the Zoom? Oh, yep. Manny, you got-
We fish a lot for bass out in Erie, and I don't know where I heard it, but they say that the bass will go in and clean a whole area of gobies out, and then move on to another shelf or reef. Or maybe it's even you guys said that. I'm not sure what you think. But we found this year that we're kind of wondering if the walleye are kind of doing the same thing. Because we found that when we fish walleye, similar to the way we fish bass, then we were doing pretty good. Like you had to be in that 10 to 30 foot range, but everything was on bottom, and if we did troll, everything was slow. We were actually ticking bottom all the time to pick them up. So like you were mentioning, like and we found walleye with gobies in it. I was just wondering if they're kind of switching over to doing the same kind of feed as the bass are.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what's happening. Is they're chasing the, and I don't think that they necessarily need to school up like they would offshore. So, I think although they are still situationally close to one another, they don't necessarily need to wolf pack to get a goby, right?
Yeah.
Gobies are easy. They're on the bottom. They just nail them, right? So it's it's effortless, and I think it's individuals that can forage on them fairly easy. Yeah.
Observation I
Yeah.
had.
Yeah. I think it's true with the bass too as well. I mean, yes, they school, but do they really need to school in order to forage better, like a wolf pack? No, I don't think that's the case anymore. They can roam on their own and catch and eat what they want when they want.
They're even catching perch that are holding
Yes, big enough gobies. Yeah,
6-8 inch gobies in them.
Little gobies, yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah, they have them in their bellies too. Yeah, question there?
Yeah, I do. I'm pretty new to downrigging and Lake Ontario fishing.
Yeah.
But I tried night fishing in Lake Ontario for salmon.
Yeah.
A few times. Every time I went out, my buddy was like, "Oh, you gotta go on the full moon. Otherwise, you're not gonna catch anything." Is there any truth to that, or?
There could be a little bit. We do have some friends that fish into the night quite a bit. They seem to dial it in. One of the things about temperature, we were talking about temperature earlier, and there's been some studies where they put data trackers in the bellies of salmon to take the temperature, the ambient temperature of the water that they're living in, and the depth. And what they found is that fish, a lot of those fish at night will find their comfort zone and stay in that comfort zone, that particular depth. So their activity level is really very stationary, I would say, in the temperature that they like. They could be swimming, they could be feeding even, but they stay in that temperature. I think it's around 50 or 55 or whatever. Yep. But then as soon as the sun cracks, you'll start to see on the history of the line graph, you'll start to see them change depth on a regular basis too. Like over 20 minutes, they'll change depths from as much as 100 feet down all the way up to above temperature of what they would prefer. And that activity level goes very, very fast and very high and undulating from great depths. And then all of a sudden, as the day wears on or the morning wears on, you'll start to see their activity level go more, less erratic, I would say, and deeper. And then you'll start to see that come back again at dusk. So I think a lot of it has to do with, they target those fish during the night at a particular band of temperature and just hang on there because that's where they would be hanging, right at that depth. Yeah, how they fish them, it might be a little bit different. I don't do it.
Me neither.
I haven't got into it, but they got it dialed in. They know what they're doing.
Yeah. I've never heard that it's really fast and furious fishing either. If you're in the right place, the right time, it can be like a slow, steady pick when you time it right with the night fishing. But yeah, it's nothing I don't think I've really fished more than an hour past sunset, and that doesn't happen too often either. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very common for stager fish to fish at night around the piers, and that is with glow spoons, and that's a bit different than I think what you're talking about midsummer and offshore and that sort of thing. Yeah. Haven't really played. I've fished into the dark, maybe an hour or two into the dark, but that's about it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's good to explore.
Yeah, I want to try it out.
Yeah.
I remember being a kid off Port Credit catching salmon all night long.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's a different thing. They were all spawning fish.
Sure.
Or
That's the deal.
So I'm like, oh, I got a boat now. Let's go try it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Anyway, it didn't work out.
Yeah.
Had a good time anyway, though.
Yeah. Good.
All right. So Roman, there's nothing left on the Zoom there. Well, I think maybe we'll wrap up the recording portion of the evening. But for those that are in the shop here, we can still chew the fat for a little bit. But thank you so much, Roman, for helping us out on the technical end tonight. We really appreciate it.
That. Thank you. Yeah, that was awesome.
All right.
And one of the things too, anybody that's online as well as here at the store, if you have any questions, you driving home and you figure out, I should have asked that question. Don't hesitate to ask Mark and I. Send an email either to myself, FINtastic Sportfishing @gmail.com, or you can send to Grimsby Tackle as well.
Yep. Social media too are accessible.
Yeah. Send us a message. We love
Yeah.
trying to answer questions or doing the best we can to help.
Well, we want everyone catching fish in the end. So.
You got it. Yep.
Anyways, good night to those at home, and stay tuned that this will be uploaded onto YouTube sometime next week, and there'll be more seminars and video clips and whatnot to come throughout the off season.
Yep. All right.
Lots of thank yous.
All right.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.